Welcome to the Myofascial Health podcast hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health podcast. Now, I am joined here today by a very special guest. He's been a physical therapist for, would you say, 63 years?
Something like that.
Something like that. Excellent. He has trained over 100,000 therapists. He is the father of myofascial release. It is the one and only John Foster Barnes. Thanks so much for hopping on this podcast.
I'm glad to be here. I think I'm more the grandfather these days.
That's right, definitely. So I just want to say that you've had a huge influence on my life here. And I will say that I just finished taking healing seminar, which was a very impactful seminar for myself. And I got to share that with my partner, Yvette, and I met a bunch of new therapists to be. And one of the questions that you had asked us to remind you, which I didn't get a chance to, was to kind of get your opinion on death. You know, I think a lot of times we think about death in a negative connotation. It's a sad thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You know, I'm Vietnamese, and for us in our culture, we actually don't celebrate birthdays. We celebrate the Day of the Death, right? As a symbolism of honor to remember those ancestors who paved the way for us today. And even in cultures like Yvette's, where she's Mexican, there's Halloween coming up. And so for her, it's like Dios de los Muertos, where they celebrate the Day of the Dead. And then I'm also a rock climber. And there's a rock climber named Alex Honnold, who is a free soloist climber. That's not something that I do, but he uses death as a way to live. Can you elaborate or share any of your thoughts around death?
Well, I think we can get back into more detail about Channel 3, but I really think that Channel 3 is a way of describing our essence. And I think our essence lives for an eternity. So that you're right, our society is afraid of death. And we live our life in fear of that and make a lot of our wrong decisions because of our fear of death. When somebody unwinds, they go into still points or freeze responses. What I've seen over the years is that I think the still point is the death space. And so that the more we unwind, the more we get used to the death space, we lose our fear of death. We realize what absolutely incredible place it is. And when we lose our fear of death, we lose our fear of life. And we can start to live more fully. A lot of older cultures train people to die. And there's a very good book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And in there, they talk about how they train people to pass on and meet their demons. They talk about something called the bardo. I think the bardo is our energetic field that holds so many of our unresolved emotions, traumas, some of the horrible pain and fear that a lot of us have had to go through. So in Christian terminology, I think that's purgatory. No matter what you call it, I think that it's something that pervades everything. And although you don't have to look forward to it, I think it's a transition. It's an adventure into another space. So unwinding has a lot of positive ramifications, reducing pain, eliminating fear, resolving a lot of problems, keep circling back to us because you never really fully get in touch with the feelings associated with it. So I think the more I just recently had 2 near-death experiences, and they certainly clarified and emphasized the importance of the principle I've been teaching for quite a long time. So it was a good experience, even though I didn't really want to go through it, you know. So anyway, does that help you?
It definitely does. You bring up a few things I just want to catch up our listeners on. John mentioned Channel 3, and if you're in the Channel 3 or in the myofascial release spaces, John frequently talks about Channel 5 and Channel 3. And in a nutshell, Channel 5 is more of your linear your critical, your impulsive side, whereas channel 3 is your loving, your creative, and your more intuitive side. And it even goes beyond that in terms of, I sometimes think of channel 3 as your parasympathetic nervous system, like your rest and digest, or channel 5 being your sympathetic nervous system, like your fight or flight. And so when we're in channel 3, that is the childlike essence in which we try to remember as MFR therapists. And another thing that John had mentioned were still points. Now, something that can happen when you're doing myofascial release is someone can unwind. And it's this involuntary movement that helps you get to positions of past traumas. And whenever you get into these positions, sometimes you'll get through what's called a still point, which you're saying is kind of a window to this dead space. And in this still point, it allows you to facilitate and go through your healing process, which a lot of times we've suppressed or tried to avoid. So that was beautifully put. Another thing you had mentioned was about pain. Can you elaborate how pain is not just something that hurts, but is something beyond the physical body?
Well, pain is also a warning sign for us to protect us since the trauma wasn't fully resolved or recently after trauma. The problem with medication is that it is necessary at times, but it anesthetizes us. So that warning is not there. And too many people, while they're under medication, are re-traumatizing themselves constantly because they don't have that feedback. Are you saying pain is coming from another life, or another dimension? Is that what you're saying?
So I'll share my experience. I became a physical therapist because I tore my ACL in my left knee 4 times. And just like you, traditional therapy and healthcare failed me. I got surgery, I went through physical therapy, I didn't play sports for a year, rehab, did everything I was supposed to, and it retore. And so finally, on the last time, and God bless my parents, my mom being there for me to take care of me, and then my dad having the insurance where I could actually have those surgeries. But when I tore it the third time, I said, hey, this isn't working. I need to change everything, right? So I got a new physical therapist and a new surgeon. And through going through this process, I recognized, wow, what we are taught in school, I come to later find out, but I did everything right. I listened to the doctor and the physical therapist, and my left knee was stronger than my right knee. However, it kept re-tearing. And so no one could give me an answer as to why that was happening. Now, there's that one side where you could say, hey, I had to go through all these experiences and I missed out. But for me, it paved the path for me to eventually become a physical therapist. And those experiences helped me empathize and be very compassionate with those patients that I have the pleasure and honor of serving. And so, what I'm saying for me is like, pain can also be seen as a guide. I think when you're going on the wrong path, your body is going to let you know, like, hey, buddy, you're not going down the right path. If you keep doing these things, it's going to get worse and worse. And so I was just curious what your insights were on that subject, because I think you share a very similar journey.
Right. Well, I think that kind of protective pain is actually giving you guidance, and it probably comes from channel 3. Channel 5 has a lot of fear involved with it. That's certainly associated with it too, but channel 3 is there to help us on all different levels. Our channel 3 is very wise, and it's there to protect us at all times. The problem is, as you found out, many of us have, that channel 5 becomes overactive. And so we make a lot of our decisions out of fear. As you mentioned earlier, it's our critical, judgmental, nasty side. And it dominates most people's life. So the more we can get treated with myofascial release, the more we treat ourselves, which is very important, the more we clear up. And now we're being guided more from compassion and love and incredible wisdom. And we use channel 5, our intellectual linear side, as you said, for the wonderful tool that it is. But it's a servo mechanism, and we've let the servo mechanism run the show. It's not good, and unfortunately, it's our whole society, our whole education. So, whole education was logical and linear. And we come to find out with myofascial release in particular that our body is neither logical nor linear. So we were given a wrong roadmap to reality, and everybody's going down that road, and it's a blind alley.
Absolutely. I think something that you tell us or teach about is no matter how far down the wrong road you've gone, you can always turn around. And I happened to go down the wrong road a pretty good length of ways, but I'm finally in Channel 3. I am an advocate for myofascial release now. But those experiences, I don't regret them. I know that they helped shape who I am and the person that I will continue to become. Now, you are the founder of Myofascial Release. Can you tell the story of how you came upon this work?
Well, when I was a teenager, I was an athlete, and I skied, I swam, drove motorcycles. I was involved in competitive karate and competitive weightlifting. And one day I went down to the gym to work out, and there's nobody there to spot me. And I was doing squats with somewhere over 300 pounds. And I got to the point where I couldn't get up again. So I'd been a gymnast when I was younger. So I thought, well, I'll just do a back roll to get out of this, forgetting that when you have a 300-pound bar in your hands, it didn't let go. So I crashed onto the ground with tremendous force. I ruptured a disc at L5. I tore a lot of the ligaments in the lumbosacral area. I lay there totally stunned. I was numb from the waist down. And before I go any further, this is one of the primary principles I teach with myofascial release, but I didn't have words for it back then. So we have an energy body, which we'll talk about as time goes on. It leaves our body when we're severely traumatized to help us get through the ordeal. And in some instances, it saves our life. So I was numb from the waist down. And that instant, everything I loved, competition, emotion was taken from me. And then as the numbness wore off, the pain began. It was horrible. I actually had to crawl out of the gym. I laugh about it now, but it wasn't so funny then. That changed my life, and I went to every form of therapy possible. Such a frustrating experience because nothing but temporary results. Nobody wanted to get better more than I did. So I was invited up to a ski house. A friend of mine was a radiologist. He saw how much pain I was in. I couldn't ski, so he suggested an orthopedic surgeon. So I went and they decided I should have a spinal fusion instead of a laminectomy because I was an athlete. And I had the surgery and it helped, but I still was hurting afterwards. I'll never forget after the surgery, I think they overdosed me in anesthesia too. It took me a long time to come out of it. This is many years ago. I remember the orthopedic surgeon walking in and saying, "Oh, you did good. It's great. It was a total success. We fused you. So just never flex or extend your spine again," and walks out. If I could have walked, I would have ran after this. Anyway,
Sure.
he should have told me that before the surgery. But anyway, uh, things weren't getting better. They got better. It was not as intense. The pain wasn't. Out of frustration, I would lay on my living room floor and start to push into the areas that hurt. I found a lot of areas in my body that felt hard and very, very painful. I was still very strong, so I tried to bull my way through, and that wasn't working too well. But my intuitive voice started to click in for me. I've been very intuitive as a boy, just like most of us. And then school kind of beats it out of you. And my intuitive voice started to whisper to me to ease up, be lighter. Then it started to tell me to slow down, take more time. So I started to listen. And then one day, it told me to put my hand on my sacrum and push my sacrum down. I did that, and all of a sudden the pain started to intensify. It became very electric. I was getting scared. I was about to injure myself. I was about to take my hand off, and my intuitive voice said, "Wait until it releases." I had never heard that word release in that context before. I waited, and all of a sudden it was like a lightning bolt. Pain roared through me. I heard myself scream. I was having an out-of-body experience. I was looking down on my body, arching, screaming. And as I look back, I realized I'd hit a position in space of past trauma, which is another key to MFR. my pain went down dramatically immediately afterwards. My patients started to unwind spontaneously without me knowing what the hell was going on. I was a very logical person. I mean, it was pretty weird when it first started, but it helped people so much I couldn't stop it. I asked to speak to TMJ specialists at the osteopathic college, so I had access to their library. And I looked up the sensations I was having while I was treating myself were beyond the origin and assertion of muscles. So I started to realize that maybe this had something to do with the fascial system. So I went to the library and looked up what the osteopaths knew about the fascia. The founder of osteopathy, Dr. Andrew Still, had some really incredible ideas and concepts about the fascial system. So I found this stack of information on the fascia in the library about that high. And on top of that stack of information was a pile of dust about that high. It's been decades. But anyway, it started to illuminate the importance of the fascial system, especially through my direct experience. So that's how it sort of started.
So would you say that you started developing myofascial release before you were a physical therapist, or was this something after you kind of jumped from when you started and then going to the doctor of osteopathy?
It started after my surgery as I was a physical therapist.
Got it.
Physical therapy, when I graduated PT, we learned massage in PT school back then too. But every prescription was hot packs, ultrasound, massage, hot packs, ultrasound, massage. It was the same damn thing all the time. That was getting better. It deceives a lot of people because they feel better afterwards for a while, but it never seems to last. That's the frustrating part.
Yeah, I remember hearing that you used to call physical therapy parking lot therapy because your symptoms would return by the time you got back into the parking lot, which when I first heard that, I didn't get offended because I lived through my experience of this isn't doing anything, and it pains me to hear that that's what you were taught in physical therapy school. And here I am, I graduated in 2015 and we're still learning the same things. It's so frustrating to know that our profession isn't progressing like engineering or other professions. We're just kind of stuck in these barbaric ages. Now, that was your experience at physical therapy school. Uh, can I ask what it was like? Because it seems like even though it was decades apart, you were learning similar things.
What was physical therapy school like?
What was physical therapy school like
Oh,
for you?
no. Well, first of all, I went to physical therapy school because as an athlete, I was interested in the mind-body concept. When I got to PT school, it had no clue. As you're saying, here we are over 60 years ago, and they still have no clue. You would thought there had been some growth. When my first day in PT school, I walked into class. There's 20 women sitting there. I'm thinking, did I get in the wrong profession? And I had a second thought. This may not be too bad. Then 5 other guys showed up. But so that was sort of the ratio back in those days. I enjoyed physical therapy school. My teachers would get annoyed with me because I'd be the last one in the test, the first one out. And back in those days, everybody wore a jacket and a tie, looked really nice. I'd walk in Levi's and a plaid shirt or something, but I got the best grades in class, so they couldn't give me a hard time. In fact, at PT school, I was told I was too smart to be a PT. So,
Oh, wow.
in fact, they also told me in PT school, I didn't know much about money back then, that you'll never, as a PT, you'll never make more than $5,000 a year.
Wow.
And I thought, it doesn't sound like a lot. I heard about truck drivers that drive dangerous material make more money. And I said, well, I'll try this for a year and then I'll drive a truck if it doesn't work out. My first job as a staff therapist in a hospital, I was making $2 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was, everybody was getting. I remember I had to work on Saturdays too. And I remember reading the paper one Saturday morning before I started. And the garbage men had just had a strike. They ended up making more money than I was as a PT. I thought something's wrong with this. And then this doctor, the physiatrist that ran the PT clinic, one day comes up to me and said, do you want to do a private patient? I never heard of that. I said, what's that? So we go to somebody's house and give him some exercise and electrical stimulation, etc. I said, what do you make? He said, $5 an hour. Oh my God, I just doubled my income, you know?
Oh, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Wow. So I really took off. So I like PT, I liked it for a while. And then like you, this didn't seem like it helped for people as hard as you might try.
So I love that. And I when I learned that about you, how you got a pay bump from $2 per session to $5, I was like, I'm not complaining about what I charge, because I felt like when I was first starting, I was getting underpaid and overworked. Now, it sounds like you had this opportunity to do house calls. And I think I read that that helped you kind of develop a rapport with patients. And I think that's ultimately what drives a lot of us. Is it is the patient care, being able to speak with someone, to help them through their pain, to get to know them is one of my favorite parts about my job. Can you elaborate on how making house calls influenced your life and the trajectory of your career?
Well, I actually enjoyed it. And a lot of it was helping little ladies walking down with their walker and tripping on their catheter and all that stuff. But I've never been around older people much before, and I really enjoyed the interaction with them. They so appreciated any kind of attention. And then I started to expand my private practice and my house calls. And you get to somebody's home, and the little lady would answer the door and say, "Oh, I don't know if I can have therapy now. My show's on." Oh God. You had to sit there until the show was over and all that stuff. But that grew quite a bit over time. And then I was offered the job of chief therapist after I was at the first hospital for about a year. I started to see a lot of people at home after hours and that type of thing too, to supplement my income. So I found it very rewarding. And then I was asked to help some patients in the nursing homes. I go over there at lunchtime and got to know the older folks better too. And it was really good. I like the interaction with people, and they're very appreciative of just somebody listening to them and touching them.
Absolutely. I think I had a home health job before I started my own practice, and it helped me see a perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. And I would recommend, if you have the chance to do that, to do it, because when you do talk to the older population, and you hear the things that they talk about. And because for me, I was younger, trying to start my career. I wanted to, make a name for myself and start my own practice. But when I was speaking to these elderly patients that I was working with, you see that they've gone past that. They've already finished their careers, and like you said, they're just very appreciative of being able to speak with someone. And I remember one of my patients, here I am. She had multiple falls, so I was trying to help her walk better, get some exercise in. And every time I would go there, she would make me some instant ramen. She's like, "Oh, do you need some food?" And of course, I'd be appreciative, but I'm like, "I'm here to help you walk. Don't think this is gonna stop you from exercising today." So the conversations to be had are very influential, because you get to see that perspective. And when you ask them what they regret, it's not about the things that they did, it's about things they never got to do. And that gave me some fire to light the flame under, okay, I need to take this risk. Now, I want to share with you how I got into myofascial release. So while I was working for an outpatient orthopedic job, I was getting burnt out, and I happened to listen to a podcast by Aaron LeBauer, and he was interviewing Phil Tavolacci. And Phil got to share his experience with myofascial release and how he had low back pain and got to a point where when he was treating patients, he recognized that his back was in worse condition than his patients. And so he decided, hey, I need to do something different. And he heard about you, and I think he did like a T for T or an intensive. And he said, while it didn't solve or fix his low back pain, it was the best that his back had felt in decades. And so while I was listening to this podcast episode, I had always had the inkling to learn more about myofascial release, but I never knew who to learn it from. And so when he shared about your method, John Barnes' myofascial release approach, I thought, hey, this is the person I'm supposed to learn it from. And I Googled it, and lo and behold, there was a seminar vacation series in Austin a month away. So I ended up asking my boss, like, hey, do you mind if I take this vacation series? I'll pay for it myself. I'll take time off without pay. And then you'll have this new technique that you can use for your facility. And to my utter surprise, he said no. And I thought, wow, I can't believe that you would deny this, but this is your clinic, your practice. You can run it however you like. And he said the main reason was because with myofascial release, it seems like most therapists treat clients and patients one on one. Whereas when you're working in an insurance based clinic, they want you to treat multiple patients at the same time. And then in addition to that, he had a little judgment. He said, yeah, plus this guy kind of looks like a hippie. And for me, that's not something that discourages me from trying to learn more about you, because I was like, okay, something's off, but I still felt called to do it. Now, I went to my first myofascial release seminar series, and it really challenged my entire reality in terms of what does authentic healing look and feel like. And I say that because I took a bunch of seminars, but I never used it. And when I was working my home health job, where I was working with primarily Vietnamese speaking patients, I couldn't communicate with them with the same eloquence as I have with English. And so saying any sort of medical terminology or jargon, I just did not know how to say. But the coolest thing about myofascial release is it's beyond words. You can dialogue to help facilitate the healing process, but more often than not, you just have to be with them and be quiet. And so as I was working with patients that I couldn't speak with, they I didn't know what to expect. I remember being super nervous because in my seminars, I would, be able to facilitate an unwinding process. And here I was working on patients and nothing was happening. I think I was so into it where at the time you said we'd have to learn how to hold these holds for 8 minutes, 8 minutes at the barrier. And I would hold holds for 30 to 40 minutes sometimes, and nothing would happen. Now, I continued doing this because even though nothing was happening from my perspective, the things that they would share were, man, I feel much better. Man, I'm able to do things that I wasn't able to do before. Man, my last physical therapist, things were so painful and it didn't even help. Whereas what you're doing is very gentle, and I'm getting the ability to raise my shoulders above my hands above my shoulders. I can drive again, which I wasn't able to do before. And so I just wanted to share that my home health experience helped me in my myofascial release journey. Now, something cool about myofascial release is seeing unwinding for the first time. And at the healing seminar that I just came from, there's a lot of new therapists or even non-therapists. This is a seminar that was designed for everybody, right? You don't have to have a license to put your hands on people to take the seminar. And I got to see and remember what people's reactions were to the first time they saw someone unwind, which it can be a very jarring image. Now, when you talk about developing it, what was your first experience of seeing an unwinding process, and how did you feel and think about it?
Well, you're right. It rattles everybody's cage. Early in my career, some of my colleagues wanted me not to teach that because it would turn some people off. I said, you're right. It's going to turn a lot of people on. And I said that we need our reality broken. What I've found is our model reality basically is terribly flawed and incomplete. And I had a patient that a woman maybe in her 40s, and she had horrible TMJ problems, inability to open her mouth more, just a tiny bit, horrible headaches, neck and back pain. She had traveled all over to some of the world's leading experts, and unfortunately, it was getting worse and worse. So one day I was doing a cross-hand release on her back, and she started to move. And I had recognized that because that's what had happened to me. But then it got beyond anything I'd experienced before. And at one point, she exploded off the table. I ended up catching her upside down with my arms. And she started to slowly glide down my body. And she started to scream. And I had a PT, that doesn't usually happen. I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "I feel like I'm being born." Now, I was a PT. That wasn't my world. I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I can taste vaginal fluid." Oh boy, I got a nut on my hands here. She kept continued to slide down my body. Then she was under the treatment table, flailing all over the place, hitting the wall, making a lot of noise. One of my assistants peeked in because of all the noise. I didn't know what to do. I just said, "Go home, go home." So we kept flailing around the floor for a while. Eventually, she was done. We're both sitting there totally disheveled and sweaty. And I'm looking at this woman, have opened her mouth much more than that for years. Started to open and open. It was so far, I thought she was going to swallow her own damn head. My God. So I was pretty upset going home. I didn't know what had happened. And I could see the police coming next morning, the lawyers and all that. Came in the office the next morning. My secretary said, "So-and-so called." I said, "Yeah, I figured she would." So I called her. I said, "John, I just wanted to thank you. I haven't felt so good in 15 years." She said, "I ate breakfast for the first time today." And she said, "I didn't know about my birth." So I called my mother and asked her if she remembers anything about my birth. She said, "Oh, yes, you had a very difficult delivery." When she was sliding down my body, I forgot to mention too, when she screamed again, I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "It feels like my right arm's being dislocated." So when she talked to her mother, she said, "You had a very difficult delivery and you dislocated your right arm." So it took off from there because I saw the dramatic change in her. You never quite get used to it because from a traditional point of view, it's craziness. But the results are not crazy. It's nature's way. It never injures. That's the important thing too. It does take us back into some of the past traumas we've had, some of the horrible pain we felt, some of the fear that came up. But that's tissue memory. That's an important part of this, but it has to do with the mind. Healthcare ignored the mind. So I guess I gained confidence in knowing that this was a safe procedure. It's just without me telling people, it just started to happen more and more. And the more confidence I gained, the better results were.
I'm glad that you shared that because I think when I think of your story and you being the grandfather of myofascial release, it seems like you've been doing this your whole life. And so it's very comforting to know that there was a point where this was new to you. And it's not like you're any different than any of us. It's just that you've been doing this for much longer.
Right.
On that note, have you always been someone who's been able to express your emotions freely?
No, I was pretty tough most of my life up until that point. I had a wonderful mother, but there wasn't a lot of emotion in our household at all. And so it wasn't until I started training with myofascial release, not just unwinding, but structural work also, I could feel their feelings. I could see them trembling and all this going on for them. And it would affect me too. There was a number of times when I would be driving home and start to break down crying. A couple of times I had to pull off the road and just sob to get it out of my system. But then I lost my fear of emotions too, because I realized it's a natural thing, even though our programming says don't do it, because I felt so much better afterwards. So that's the thing I find with a lot of therapists when they first get into this, they're deathly afraid of it. Somebody might get emotional. I say, it's a big deal. Have you ever heard anybody ever getting injured by emotion? You feel better. You just, one of the examples I give in unwinding is it's like in our society, we're like volcanoes. We're told never to explode. So with unwinding, you will explode, and there'll be a lot of chaos and trembling, but that's healing. And after the explosion, there'll be peace in the valley. With traditional therapy, there's no peace in the valley. Myofascial Health gives us hope, and that's really important. Because most of the people you see and I see in health therapists I've trained, they've lost hope because all the experts are telling them there's nothing on the tests, there's nothing wrong with you, all that stuff. And finally, they have hope, and that is part of the whole, a huge part of the whole healing process.
Hope is definitely something you never want to stifle. I think as a human being, you're trying to connect with somebody. And I think the worst thing you could ever tell a patient who is suffering from pain is, hey, it's all in your head. There's nothing showing up on the imaging. Like, this is just all in your head. And that would drive anybody insane. And so I think as a therapist, we just connect as human beings, and the genuine care and compassion you have for somebody definitely allows you to resonate. And then hopefully, as myofascial release therapists and those who aren't in this world will start to learn is that, hey, our paradigm is shifting, right? The things that we've learned have been done on research from dead people. So that is not going to really align when we're working with actual human beings, living human beings. Now, something that you had mentioned was something about the energy body. And I think that's very interesting because in physical therapy school, a lot of times we're not even talking about energy. Can you speak more to the energetic body or the different sensations that coincide with myofascial release and what we're doing to it?
Well, we can only differentiate the energy body from what we call the physical body with words. The physical body is also energy. It's just a denser, different vibration from that. The energy body is, for centuries, has been called our life force, prana, ki, chi, on and on and on. It's what activates us and stimulates every cell of our body. And of course, healthcare ignored that. Like you said, all the research has been done on dead people. And as you know, dead people are brittle and dead people have no consciousness. And that's the model reality we learned, and then all the techniques we learned in PT school or other professions is based on that flawed model of reality. So that's why also the ground substance of the fascial system are completely ignored. And so the energy also flows through the fluid of our body, which is the ground substance. We go through trauma and that becomes more and more viscous. As you know, it turns into crushing pressure eventually, up to approximately 2,000 pounds per square inch. And it blocks the energy flow. Another word for energy is consciousness. From the work of Dr. Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hamerhoff, they're two of the leading experts on consciousness. Basically, consciousness is photons flowing through the ground substance of the fascial system. And when you get this crushing pressure, consciousness is blocked, and then we get into trouble and we get into disease. If you separate the word dis-ease, lack of ease, what the ancients were talking about was the blockage of energy and consciousness. So our body cannot function in a harmonious way.
I completely agree with that. Now, something that is interesting about your journey, because with myofascial release, I feel like we live in a world where we are taught how to eat soup with a fork. But myofascial release and alternative therapies teach you how to use a spoon. And then myofascial release specifically, I think, is a soup spoon. But when you're eating soup with a spoon and everybody else around you is eating soup with a fork, and everyone is saying, hey, this is just the way we've always been doing it. And you're sitting there with the spoon being like, yo, this is way better. This is helping people and it's getting permanent results and people are raving about it. But because everyone gets taught to eat soup with a fork, so to speak, how did you go about overcoming those obstacles of recognizing what you're doing was authentic healing, but the environment around you was saying, hey, this is the way that it's been done, and we're going to continue doing it this way? Did you ever have to overcome any criticisms or judgments like that?
Only for 50 years.
Oh, God.
Probably right now we're being criticized. I don't care. we're helping people in a significant way. And most of the therapists I'm trained are highly successful therapists. Um, the resistance has been enormous. When I first started, I didn't quite understand it because like you said, what are they all upset about? We're helping people. We're not injuring it. I never injured anybody. In over 60 years of my career, I've never injured one person, nor have the therapists that I've trained. Channel 5, you mentioned the linear logical side. It hates anything different. I think it's life-threatening to it in some deep level. So it basically will criticize, ridicule, or attack you if you dare to do something different. So a lot of the therapists out there that may be listening to this have been through that. And it's not pleasant and it's strange, but that's the way of the world. If myofascial release in your heart, you believe in it, never give up. Don't let that back you off. I've never lost one patient. All they do is send 10 of their friends who send 10 of their friends, that type of thing. So the criticism is absolutely unbelievable. The results of patients were so profound, I couldn't possibly give it up. I run into a lot of therapists, as you know, and somebody will be somebody from maybe Nebraska or something like that. They will say, oh, gee, I have nobody to talk to about this. Well, man, 50 years ago, I couldn't talk to anybody about this, for God's sake, you know?
So I share your same story where when I first came into myofascial release, I was kind of alone. Even though you were very welcoming, and I still remember those first seminars where you were very patient with me. I think I would ask a ton of questions and you would be very patient, even though I was very, very skeptical. So I want to thank you for that. And I also want to apologize for anyone listening because now there's a 3-question limit in seminars. I don't know if it's because I was asking a bunch of questions, but I'll take the blame for that. It's fine. But I will say that you were very patient with me during my process. And I felt kind of alone and feeling like, oh, I got this secret that I know is going to help people. But the environment and the friends that I was around were kind of putting it down, saying like, it seems like the wool's being pulled over your eyes. It seems like this guy is gonna, scam you kind of thing. But when I went through the seminar, the things that I saw and felt could not be denied. And for me, I recognize, hey, like you said, not everyone is going to jive with it. Something that you had written in your book was when you're able to accomplish something that others haven't been able to do, they resent you for it. And I don't really understand that. I kind of find that confusing. When I hear that like somebody's able to do something, it inspires me. It lets me know, hey, it can be done. And there's breadcrumbs. But I think some people have an ego about it, or maybe it reminds them that they're not doing the right things, or they've just succumbed to the fear and don't want to take risks. And so when I read about how you've overcome these challenges or these criticisms, even coming from your staff, even coming from the people that were right close with you, you just didn't care. But did you have to let any of those relationships go?
Well, let me back off just a little bit now. The 3-question limit is nothing to do with you.
Okay.
It's the linear types that I constantly ask linear questions and just don't get what I'm trying to talk about. And they seem to forget there's 100 other people in the room or whatever, you know. So you had to, but that doesn't stop them. A couple of summers ago, we went into that. Within half an hour, somebody already asked 10 questions. We were really offended. I asked them to ease up a bit, you know. You're very bright. I actually enjoyed your questions. I knew you were skeptical. And I found if I can really be patient, the skeptical ones will turn around. But you're exceptionally bright and creative. It made me think. I actually enjoyed your questions. And and you got better and better as time went on. So I'm glad I was patient with you because you're exceptional. But some of the questions are Aunt Sally questions, as you know. That's people want a formula, you know. So that's why we don't allow on MFR Insight, and we don't allow people to give treatment advice because if we don't see them or touch them, we can't give them. It's useless, you know. People, Channel 5 wants formulas. It's you don't have to think that way. The problem is the formula doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And you've heard me say this before too, that we have over 8 billion people in our world today. There's 8 billion different fascial strain patterns totally unique to that person. So the art of myofascial release is feeling their restricted pattern and applying the proper principles to it. And it also requires a therapist who's centered. Most therapists, they take a test and that's it. Well, with myofascial release, the learning never ends. We just deepen and deepen ourselves. And so that's a fascinating journey. The patient appreciates it. It feels safe with somebody that's centered. When you're in channel 5, they feel the fear in the therapist's body and it shuts them down. So the principles are vitally important, but it's also applied by somebody that's centered and feeling their pattern and treat them as an individual. Anyway, your questions were great.
And I appreciate that. And I do remember you had asked me, you let me through, and there was a time when you would take pictures and sign things. And I remember you asked me, like, are you gonna continue this work? And I was like, I'm not sure. I'm very skeptical. But I let you know that it's a good thing to be skeptical, because if this is true, which it is, I have now become your biggest supporter, and I am now helping others find this path if it resonates with them. And so I just again want to appreciate and thank you for being patient with that skeptical kid. And I'm still going to have that. I think the fifth agreement that you've recommended, which is a book, is be skeptical but learn to listen. And listening is listening to understand, not listening to respond. And so I was very open to what you were saying, because I was like, yo, if this is the best thing since sliced bread or a sham, I need to figure it out. And so I need to make sure that I give it an open and honest mind. And I can't help but smile when I think back to my journey. Now, the question that I asked that I want for you to be able to share some insights on is, how do you overcome the criticism, even when it's coming from the people closest with you? I think when I read a little bit about your life, it was that people were asking you to do seminars. And even when people are asking you and you decide to do it, even your staff criticized you about doing that. And so did you ever have any limiting beliefs, or were you standing in your own confidence and knowing, hey, I already know what this is going to be like, no matter what anyone says?
Well, I've been confident my whole life and not cocky, but just believe in myself. I was an only child, and my mother was very wise. I had a great mother, and my father died when I was 3. And she did a very wise thing. Whenever she talked to my father, it was always very loving. She would give me visuals. So, a lot of families, you mimic the father, the brother, the sisters, and all that. That's not always good. So I had an image to follow to learn how to be a man and think for myself. So even early on, I enjoyed responsibility. I didn't. Some people are scared to death of responsibility. I actually enjoyed problem solving, and responsibilities go along with life. My mother would have parties once in a while, wanted me to be there. I just remember being 6 or 7, sitting in the corner, bored on my gourd, And I'd be sort of listening to the conversation. All of a sudden, I hear something come out of me. Everybody turn around and look at me. You ever see that E.F. Hutton commercial? Everybody would just look at you. He said, where did this come from, this kid, So I had access, I think, to Channel 3 early in my life, and it gave me great confidence. So when I went through criticism, I believed in myself. I believed in what I was doing. I could not deny what was happening to the patients. I wouldn't let anybody stop me. So I was strong physically and mentally and emotionally. And I really realized early on, something you all have to realize, you have to detach from the outcome. Most people spend their life just worried about what people think about them. If I walk in a seminar and there's a bunch of people, I'm walking down an aisle, somebody calls me from one side, somebody calls me from the other, I can only physically turn one way. If I turn this way, the person over here said, that's son of a bitch. I knew he was an egomaniac, and sits there and glares at me for 3 days, Hey, last day they invariably come up sobbing, can I hold you? I want to hug you. I realize you're my, He was represented my father or my boyfriend beat me or something like that, you know? So you have to not worry about that, you know? There's a good book I've recommended, uh, The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. It's a wonderful book. I think all of you, if you've read it, read it again. Take nothing personally. And the detachment from the outcome is, to me, the key to life and the key to being a great therapist. I can tell you a story about that if you want. If we have time, we can come back to it.
Yeah, go ahead and share the story. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. When I first got interested in the fascial system, and I was looking at the different aspects of it, I learned the fascial system has copious amounts of melanin. It's our body's superconductor. And I heard about a Dr. Frank Barr who was researching melanin. And he was part of a symposium in New York City. So I decided I'd drive up and see what he had to say. So he was a great speaker, had a lot of very interesting information. After which we started to talk and ended up going to lunch together, having a very interesting conversation. And there's other speakers on there that I hadn't heard of. One of them was Arthur Bell. He was a developer of helicopter flight, a rather incredible achievement. He's a very interesting guy. And he was talking about the trials and tribulations of developing helicopter flight. And one of the things he said to me gave me a good visual that maybe will help people too. He said, for a helicopter to turn, it must tilt in that direction. The moment it tilts in that direction, it's lost all power to do anything but that. In other words, it's biased. So as therapists, when we go in with our protocols, we're biased. Because the patient has a mind, the subconscious picks up your intention, your bias. And as well-intentioned as you may be, it goes into resistance. So just remember, when you're treating somebody, you're not centered, you're thinking too much, you're involved with performance anxiety, just take a breath and soften, come back to your center. You'll be back into full power. Then and only then can we truly help people. And that's when they get in touch with their power. Part of the story I've told in Unwinding too, they had a keynote speaker, an Asian man. He's very old, he's in his 90s somewhere. They had to help him up on the stage. He looks to the audience and he said, my lifelong avocation has been, he started flipping through his notes. No, I'd forgotten his lifelong avocations. Get that a point, push me the hell off the stage, you know. So anyway, detaching from the outcome is critical. It's your whole life. Otherwise, we're miserable, and Channel 5 is dominating us.
I agree with that. And it's taken me a while to really live out these principles. You know, I think in the beginning, I can agree and learn from it. And I see the environment and the community and the tribe. But it takes a little bit of time for me to make that change. Now, again, you know, you're very patient, and I was always curious about this work, but I'm finally at this stage in my life where I am living out the principles more fully. And I think that's made a huge difference. You know, the one thing that was very special is with Healing Seminar, it's designed for, well, I wouldn't know if it's designed for this, but something that can happen is you get to share this experience with somebody else. And so I got to go with my partner Yvette, and I'll say that healing can be very messy sometimes, you know,
Very what?
very messy
Oh, yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And where I mean by we have to detach from the outcome is because I remember when she was willing to go to Healing Seminar, I kind of had an outcome attached to it. I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. She's going to be able to see me in my element, see me as a myofascial release therapist. This is going to be awesome. But it was Healing Seminar in which triggers were triggered, in which that's where you see that is the place that you need to heal. And so I'll say that on the first day when she saw you unwinding or helping someone to unwind on stage, her initial visceral response was, this isn't for me, I don't want to be here, give me the keys. And I definitely made the mistake because, again, and I need to reread the four agreements, I took it personal. I was like, oh my gosh, how could you do this to me, you know? But I recognized after I got centered that, hey, everyone is going to have their own experience, and I need to remember what it was like to be here for the first time, and I remember that I got triggered and got rubbed the wrong way. And I'll say that throughout the seminar, she opened up and she stayed. And by the end of it, she actually brought it up to me and said, "Hey, if you want to go to Women's Health in February, I'd be willing to go." And so for me, it allowed us to grow together. And being able to share this healing journey with your partner, I think, is something very special. Now, something that you also teach is sometimes it takes chaos to reorganize to a higher order. And I had asked you in the seminar because I had saw, whether it be me and Yvette or you and Donna, there was a little bit of chaos which got reorganized. And I tried to ask you in the seminar, but you said, "Hey, this is kind of a longer term answer." And you gave us some guidance. Obviously, we did a great exercise that me and Yvette continue to do, and it does help us with our relationship. But can you talk about how chaos is necessary to reorganize to a higher order in the context of relationships and myofascial release?
Yeah, before we do that, you triggered a visual for me. At part of the healing seminar, you were sitting in a row with a couple of physicians near you.
Yes.
One was a osteopath, I think. How was their response to it?
They had the exact same thing. They were very triggered. It was jarring for them. And I remember Yvette spoke with Joe, so he's the optometrist, and they're like, "What do you think about this?" And they had "I don't know if this is for me." And I remember having that same response. Jason, who is the doctor of osteopathy, he also had that same response where he's like, "I don't even know if I'm going to be back for day two." So everyone that sat in our group, even though we were recommended to go from Rowena, who is an established therapist in Las Vegas, we all had that moment. And except for me, because I'm more familiar with the work.
So chaos. The reason that we hold uh, the release for over 5 minutes, as you know, a number of phenomena occur. So most of healthcare has been too fast. And these phenomena do not occur, which have to do with authentic healing. So that somewhere around the 5 minute period, piezoelectricity is developed. That's a Greek word for pressure electricity. It's a well-known fact that our cells have a crystalline nature. And when you put pressure into a crystal, our body is a biocrystal, it generates energy flow. That's then coupled with mechanotransduction, which means our mechanical pressure basically also is converted to energy flow. And the phenomenon of mechanotransduction also produces interleukin-8, which is our body's natural anti-inflammatory. So then we go into phase, I'm getting to your question. We get to phase 3, phase transition. We go into a period where it's a chaotic period. Chaos to healthcare is a bad word because healthcare is all about order and control. Problem is, this isn't working that well. So it's systems theory. When you go into a chaotic period, system theory has shown that's the only time there's the possibility of growth and healing. We do have a mind. We can no longer ignore it in healthcare. Most absurd thing we ever learned. So as you go through that chaotic period, because we have a mind, we always reorganize at a higher level. So that's what's so important about myofascial release. And as you know, we finally move into what's called resonance. That's another word for the release. And when we first touch somebody energetically and structurally, our vibratory rates are quite different. But given a sufficient amount of time, there will really be a point where we resonate and all the energy starts to become identical. And that's when the flow occurs. That's when the system rehydrates and starts to let go of the horrendous pressure on pain sensitive structures. So in a relationship, we start out in channel 5. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. We start in channel 3, and everything's so nice. And you'll say, "Gee, he's so cute when he says that." 6 months later, he says the same thing. She's trying to tear his head apart, So turns into channel 5, So this is what's so important about myofascial relationships, and it's helped a lot of people in the healing seminar. You will go into chaos. You will be triggered big time. But if you allow yourself to go through it, it takes courage. You reorganize and then you start to connect from the heart level back into channel 3 instead of the linear uh, channel 5 intellectual side. So we make so many of our decisions in relationships too, and the people we choose in channel 5, which is fear. So with channel 3, it'll open you up to find the right person for you. And arguments will occur, but you have to. Channel 5 is so desperate to be right all the time. That's what ruins most relationships. So with a relationship, if you can just agree to disagree once in a while, and that will create more harmony, more joy, and teach your partner, not you in particular, but just teach him or her to learn to go into channel 3, and the relationship will deepen. Even if it's going bad, it can be turned around most of the time.
I love that. And I will say that it's been very cool to see Yvette come back from healing seminar feeling a little bit lighter, being able to release some things that she hasn't been able to release in it seems like her whole life. And so now when we have conversations, we can throw the MFR lingo of channel 5 and channel 3 being like, yo, is this channel 5 or channel 3? And we recognize that we want to be more of channel 3. Now, I would like to share my perspective on that because I think it's normal and actually necessary to have arguments in relationships because you're two very different people coming together. And so you're going to stand by, whether it be your views or your upbringing, cultures, whatnot. And it's important to stand by that because whenever I meet a couple who's always like, oh, we never argue at all, it kind of makes me think like someone's not being vulnerable enough or someone's getting walked over. That being said, you're absolutely right. You don't want to be too prideful, which is channel 5, where it's like, I have to be right. I have to be right. We have to do it this way. And which it's not, right? A relationship is two people coming together. And if you can, I would say a channel 3 thing is what is it that we're both trying to accomplish versus this is what is right for me, which is relative. Then ultimately, for me and Yvette at least, we've been able to learn how to dance through the chaos and ultimately grow from it. You definitely want to grow through the conflict and not have it just be another point of contention. Now, I will say that it was very comforting to see you and Donna because there's just a little thing in which I know that in the past you said, and now it's like, oh, just agree to disagree and move on. But I saw that you said, hey, I made a mistake, in which I thought, hey, even John Barnes himself can learn, but he has to want to learn. Everybody can learn and change, but they have to be the one who wants to do that. Now, myofascial release has grown. I think you just had a great MFR3 experience that just finished up. I couldn't help but remember my myofascial release 3 experience in which I felt like everyone needs to be very present, from walking down into the canyon. I'm not sure if they did that this year. I even remember sharing a tequila shot with you. I remember these moments that brought me joy versus, I think I heard some people like, oh, it's so hot outside or this climb is too rigorous. How is Myofascial Release 3 this year for you?
It was great this year. We had a wonderful group, broke records as far as attendance went too. And in every seminar, there's always one or two that don't quite get it. Uh, but anyway, out of 100 people, that's pretty good. They were a very good group. They were very jovial. They loved the outdoor experiences. The evals were incredible, life-changing, wonderful, and all that. So it was good. The evals of not just 3, but I wrote an article once called "Where's the Danish?" and the evals have consistently over decades now been like 98, 97%. Incredible seminar. You've changed my life. I really enjoyed myself. And then there's always I call them the 3%ers. One person says it's too cold. The person said the next one said it was too hot. Somebody bitched because there wasn't any. Somebody bitched because there was, that kind of stuff. linear mind just has to do that until they finally get over it. It's like a handicap for some people. I hear that from people. Say, oh, I'm very linear. I feel like saying, I'm sorry you're so handicapped, you know. But it's hard to get out of the Channel 5 mode because it's been our lifetime of programming. But it can happen. And even people coming to 3, they were ready to go except for these 2, which is the way it is, you know. But
I hear
certain
you.
people like kicking the pebble starts the apples. Who knows what, even though they were bitching about a couple of things, who knows what's happening weeks or months later too, you know. Going back to Channel 5 and the relationship too, it does get triggered. And if you're in Channel 5 mode, which most people are in a relationship, it's reactive. Think of the word react. So something they say or do, they react the same way over and over and over again. As you learn to move into Channel 3, become responsive. You have a million variations of possibilities that you're open to change instead of fighting it. So the Channel 3 experience is the only way to go with a relationship for sure also.
Beautifully stated. And I will say that I have felt a shift since healing seminar. It's this weird sensation where I feel like I'm parenting people, where it's like I'm learning how to respond. I'm learning how to stay present and centered, kind of like the eye of the hurricane as the chaos is kind of swirling around me. And so I didn't feel this shift during the seminar, but like you said, you kick the pebble and the avalanche can come way later, you know? And so I can just say from my personal experience that it has been very profound in ways that I didn't think, at least during the seminar, but I can tell that I'm handling situations very differently than I would have even just 2 years ago. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. And Yvette and I are continuing to have our relationship and build on it. And like you said, the doctor of osteopathy and his brother, the optometrist, their relationship as brothers has improved. So it was a cool thing to be able to share with somebody, but also recognize that that wasn't the typical thing I got from the seminars. Now, myofascial release will continue to grow. And the way that I perceive that you are have building it is kind of like a fence, right? And so you want to abide by the principles of MFR, and that's the fence. But all of us who learn these techniques and the approach, we're kind of like vines that are growing along with it. So it's like we kind of go in different directions as long as we're abiding to the principles. I want to ask you, where do you see the future of myofascial release?
Well, you're right. The principles create a framework for us, and then we have our own unique expression like vines growing through all that, you know. So I think that we're to the point where it's going to be growing exponentially. In a real, it's I have a lot of wonderful instructors that are helping me out. They're very quite incredible, and I'm really grateful for that. Uh, when somebody passes on, there's always this stuff. Everybody comes up with their version of it, and that bastardizes the whole thing. If you take a couple gears out of a very finely honed machine, it goes into chaos eventually too, you know. So it's really important that we stay true to the principles. We all keep furthering our ability to center ourselves and open our heart and be loving. And I think it's just going to continue to grow and grow at a very rapid rate. So
Can I ask you to put that in a channel 3 vision? Like, what do you envision for the future? And the reason I ask is because whenever I get to go to Sedona to take a myofascial release seminar, it is just such a deep, magical experience for me. And to the point where I'm looking forward to taking women's health in February. But I noticed that it's no longer going to be in Poco Diablo, it's going to be in a casino. So I can't help but think that the energy is going to shift a little bit. So is there a vision that you could share in terms of what that looks like to you?
here's a vision for you. We're going to be doing women's health next to the one-arm jacks. Totally nude. It just reminded me, there's a guy that used to take the seminars. He always sat in the front row. He's annoying as hell, totally linear, would not get off of it, you know. He went to a seminar one night to treat somebody. The hotel wouldn't allow it. So we got a call Sunday morning from one of the staff at the hotel, very upset because say one of our students has set a massage table up next to the breakfast bar. He's doing massaging somebody nude next to the brunch. So I could write a book just from the seminar experiences, believe me. I strongly believe that myofascial release will be the healthcare of the future. We always will need doctors, we'll need medication when appropriate, we'll need surgery at times, there's no doubt about it. But myofascial release is something that is going to be the healthcare. It doesn't have to change that much now. It's quite complete. And I wish I'd be around long enough to see that, but I probably won't be, but it will be. Maybe I won't die. I think I'll just hang out, you know. I'm 333 years right now, so it's that guy in the Methuselah or something like that. So I was hanging out here, you know. I'm enjoying life, and that's the key. We have to, as therapists, we have to learn to enjoy our life so we can help other people do the same. That's channel 3. So it's going to have a tremendous impact on mankind in general. As we said many times, so many of us have gotten dysfunctional messages as if we're here to suffer. And that's not true. We're here to enjoy our life and help other people do the same. Hey, I run into a lot of wealthy people. They have all the toys, cars, boats, jewelry, all that, houses. As I treat them, I just feel this horrible sadness pouring off of them. And I just have to think, what's the purpose of life if you're just going through the motions? And Channel 5 is an empty existence, basically. We're wasting our life. We weren't meant to do that. We were meant to be in Channel 3. So I think it's a return to the way nature originally wanted for us. And yes, you're going to struggle. You know, there's going to be a lot of resistance. But if we don't give up, we're going to do fine. There's nothing wrong with having the toys, but if you're not enjoying your life, what's the purpose? It's craziness, you know. There's an old song by Peggy Lee. It says, that's it. That's all there was. And that's the Channel 5 experience. So the more the spread, it's going to, and this has gotten to a huge point from where I started. Remember, I was told when I first started these seminars, this is just a fad.
Mm-hmm.
So some fad that sort of lasted for a long time, hasn't it? But it's grown tremendously. And it's grown not from any doctor or research project, and never will, because they're still coming from reductionist theory, fragmenting things. It's going by word of mouth, opening other people's hearts, opening our heart, and it's going to take off. It is taking off. And so let's enjoy the ride.
Absolutely. If there's something that I can learn from you, it's if you are dreaming big enough, then what you are trying to accomplish won't be able to be done in just your lifetime. And I hope that I continue to be able to enjoy your presence and your essence. There was something I wanted to read to you because it resonated with me in terms of how you have been able to impact my life. It is, every now and then, a person with no ulterior motive and no self-interest will take pleasure in helping you to succeed, grow, and live your purpose. This person will operate in love, will seek no praise, and will want nothing in return. This person is a gift. So I just want to say thank you so much for hopping on this podcast. I very much enjoyed our conversation and hearing your insights about myofascial release. Before we head out, is there any last thing that you would like to share with my listeners?
Just that I'm proud of you. And I'm proud of all the therapists I've interacted with. They're exceptional people. They're doing a really important work. So let's keep going.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, Learn more about how it can help at www.myofascial.health/website.